Okay, thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Bryn Lemon. I am the Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement and Scholarships for the University of California's Education Abroad program. I'll have Rachel and Cheyanne share their titles really quick, and we'll go into deeper introductions in a moment. Rachel, do you want to start?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. So my name is Rachel DeAngelis. I went to UCSB, graduated class of 2017. I currently live in the UK. I'm in London, and I work in higher education, similar to Bryn actually, but not for UC. Good to be here.
And hello, everybody. I'm Cheyanne. I also went to UCSB and I graduated in 2014, which feels like forever ago. I've been living in London now for 8 years and currently taking a break from work, but I have mostly spent my time in the tech industry, working in HR, recruitment, that kind of stuff.
Perfect. Thank you both so much for introducing yourself. So, the format of our talk today is that all three of us will give a slightly more in-depth introduction into our backgrounds and what brings us here and how we're connected to UCEAP. And then we will go ahead and move into some questions regarding visas, regarding work culture in the UK, and things of that nature. I have several questions pre-prepared, but this talk is really for all of you in attendance. So as soon as we're done with our introductions, you're more than welcome to put questions into our chat functionality down below, and we'll answer them live. We'll ask Rachel and Cheyanne to share their expertise in these particular matters. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them into the chat. But I'll go ahead and do a slightly more in-depth introduction of myself. As I mentioned, my name is Bryn Lemon. I've been working for the system-wide office of UCEAP for 7 years now. So I am also a graduate of UCSB. Rachel and I were actually in our freshman year dorms together, so it's lovely to continue our relationship to this day. And I studied abroad at the University of Edinburgh for a year during my undergraduate degree when I was completing a degree in English literature. And I loved Scotland so much that I moved back to the UK to serve as a program intern in our office in Edinburgh. Unfortunately, these positions are no longer funded, but I do hope that they'll eventually come back into play. We used to have one in our London Study Centre and in our Edinburgh Study Centre. One day, I'm hopeful that recent graduates will have the opportunity to conduct this again. But beyond that, I was not ready to move home to California. I lived in Chile for one more year, and then I moved back to the US. So it's great to meet all of you. It's lovely to see a lot of younger alumni in attendance as well. So thank you all so much for coming. And I'll go ahead and let Cheyanne give a slightly more in-depth introduction into her experience on, a study abroad and how she got back to the UK. So I'll go ahead and let her start.
Sounds good. All right. Yeah. So, as I mentioned, it's been 8 years now in London, which has been incredible. But while I was in school at UC Santa Barbara, I just didn't even have my passport, had dreamed of travel, but just never really knew how to make it happen until I finally was walking on campus and saw some signage for UCEAP. And I'm so glad I did. But I ended up being able to get the opportunity to do a summer abroad in Florence, in Italy. It was an 8 week program. It was mostly Italian language courses and then some art history that I got to do in the afternoons. And that was just game changing for me to be able to have that exposure to travel, living abroad, or just even for a summer being at school abroad. It was such a cool experience. And every weekend took the opportunity to jump to the train station or to the airport and see as much as I could. And from there, it just gave me the absolute travel bug. Like, how can I get abroad again? How can I travel or how can I live in another country and have that experience? And when I graduated, there was just so much going on in my life that I was a little bit like, okay, let me just get a job first, get my bearings of what I actually want to do with my life, and then I'll see how I can make that a broad piece of it happen. And luckily, I was able to relocate from Santa Barbara up to San Francisco, live in the Bay Area, get into the tech industry. My husband and I actually met at UCSB, and we both moved up to the Bay and did tech together. And I don't know what it was in me, but I was, early 20s, and I was like, I have to live abroad by 25. I don't know why I said that, but I was just like, this is a thing I have to do. And so my then boyfriend and now husband and I kind of, it was a game of who could get the visa first, who could get the opportunity first. Both being in tech, luckily our companies both had offices abroad. And it was a little bit of like, okay, where do we go? How do we pick a city? How do we make that job move happen? I'll share more details as we get into the conversation. But luckily, we had had a few kind of 2 week trips that we had done and picked London as the city that we'd love to live in. I'd been there a few times, we'd traveled there a few times, and with the English language being an easy transition to move over to the UK, we thought we'd start there and see what happened. And my husband was able to get the visa. I was a dependent on that, even though we weren't married at the time, they could still do that dependency. And we were both able to move our jobs to London. And it was kind of a let's go for a year, see what happens. If we love it, we'll keep doing it. If not, we'll move somewhere else or we'll move home. We'll kind of just see what happens. And I blinked and it's been 8 years and I have permanent residency here now. I'm loving it. We bought a flat, we have a dog, we did the whole like settling in the UK experience. And it's just been so cool to really live out that abroad dream that I had. I really was kind of in the is this real? Is this happening for such a long time? And now it truly feels like home. And I couldn't imagine living anywhere else. London's just to me the coolest city in the world. And after all this time, I've traveled to 30 countries. I take a lot of my PTO to travel. I just came back from 2 weeks in Italy. It's just so cool to have this experience of living in Europe and living in the UK specifically, and being able to make that kind of college dream of travel a real reality and kind of integrate my life and my career and my passion for kind of what I do in HR and recruitment and be able to actually do it in a country that I love. So, yeah, I'm happy, of course, to answer questions. And as we'll kind of dive into how I did that more technically. But yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell. It's been a great experience. And yeah, love that I can share it more with everybody and see how I can help.
Thank you so much, Cheyanne. I appreciate that. Rachel, would you like to take your turn?
Yeah, absolutely. So when Cheyanne and I first met, we were kind of going through our stories, and we realized that we actually had quite a bit in common in terms of, both going to UCSB. I also studied abroad in Florence, which I'll get to in a second. But yeah, it was really fun. And then, getting to be able to share these stories is really special. So thanks so much again for having both of us, Bryn. But yeah, so I can go into a little bit more detail about myself. So I grew up in California my whole life. I never lived anywhere else. At UCSB, I did a theater major and an Italian minor. As I mentioned, I have some family members in Italy. They don't speak any English. So I think what originally drew me to study abroad was a chance to be able to get to know them better and get to learn Italian, be able to speak to them, have that relationship, which we still have to this day. So I think from the start, even when I was touring schools and trying to figure out where I wanted to go, study abroad was super important to me. And I remember asking about it on the tours. I remember when we did the tour at UCSB, I remember asking like if anyone had studied abroad so I could make sure I did the tour with that person. So I was able to do that pretty much from the get-go, before I even started at UCSB. So I was always drawn to study abroad. I was always drawn to Italy. I feel like that was a no-brainer for me. And then I did that program. Yeah, it was focused on Italian language, art history. We got to go to different museums. It was a really, really special class. I'm still friends with a lot of the people from my study abroad group as well. That was great. And some of the people that I met in Italy as well are still there. And yeah, just love that. But I loved study abroad so much that when I went back to UCSB and was doing my final year, I tried to squeeze in as many credits as I could so that I could go abroad a second time. And that was when I went to a dual program, London and Paris, about 6 weeks in each city, and that was amazing as well, and kind of what gave me the bug for wanting to come back to London one day. But I feel really lucky that I got to do 3 cities, 2 programs. And then when I came back, yeah, so when I was also back at UCSB, I also interned at the UCEAP study abroad office. So I was in the arbor handing out flyers, trying to get people to come study abroad, going into different classrooms and talking about my experience, posting promotional material, pretty much anything that anyone wanted to do. If anyone wanted to hear about my study abroad experience, I wanted to talk about it. So that was really fun and kind of allowed me to still be able to keep one foot in the door of that study abroad experience for me when I had come back. So that was really special. And then after UCSB, I worked in the Bay Area where I'm from for 2 years. I didn't get to travel internationally for that job, but it was kind of right in between the travel and the education sectors. So it was a really, that job was perfectly positioned for kind of what I was interested in, and got to meet a lot of international clients, a lot of exposure to the UK market as well, which is kind of was serendipitous in the sense that I didn't really know that was what I was getting into when I signed up for that job. But it just kind of fell into my lap that it happened to be the market that I, wanted exposure to. So that was really, really good. And I think ultimately that kind of drew me back to the UK. So when I went back a couple years later to the UK, I actually did my master's over here. So I got a master's degree from UCL. I studied European studies, of course. What better place to study than over here? And that was really a really interesting experience. Very different to maybe my time at UCSB. I was a little bit older. It was a 1 year program. It was a lot smaller, a very different sense of academic experience as well as compared to Santa Barbara and studying in the US. But for me, it was the perfect program for me and really set me up for success over here, I think. So yeah, and then now what I do for work is I actually was able to connect with some of the people who I'd met in my first role when I was working in the Bay Area, leverage those connections into finding a job over here, a permanent role. And now I do that. So I work for another university out here. I do recruitment and admissions. Basically, what it means is that I get to fly around the world, encouraging people to study abroad and study in the UK. So it really feels like my everything has come full circle, I think, from the time that I went abroad, which was about over 10 years ago, if you can believe that. So yeah, really special. And I think it's something that I never really I never really thought that that would be possible going abroad and being able to do it. And it took a lot. It took some time. I didn't get back over here. It wasn't instant. I still, went back to work in the Bay Area. I took 6 months and traveled around Australia with a friend. I came, and then I did my master's over here for a year and then I started working. So it was kind of all over the place. And I think that will, happy to get into that later in the questions in terms of, if you're thinking about wanting to do this, how to set yourself up for those next steps and how to put the footprint down to really be able to make that a reality one day. But yeah, similar to Cheyanne, I have these pinch me moments when been here over 5 years now. So I have these moments when I'm just sitting in a park in London or coming back from a show and, getting the tube home and I just kind of have these pinch me like, is this my life? Is this real? And that, that is something I still feel kind of to this day. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you so much, Rachel. And you've laid some great foundation for our next question here about how to get a footprint in the country and next steps. So the first question I have laid out here, and again, those in the audience, please go ahead and put questions into the chat. I would rather focus on what you're interested in hearing about, but I presume this is a question on everyone's mind, which is let's talk about visas. So all things visas. You've shared a little bit about your personal journey towards obtaining your visa. Cheyanne, something exciting that you didn't share is that you are nearly a citizen. So I'm so excited for you to share about that. But I would love a little bit more backstory. Obviously, everyone's visa experience is super, super unique and individual, and I love that each of you have your own path towards residency here. Cheyanne actually has done a lot of work with others at her company in terms of helping them through this process. So I think we'll start with your explanation. Then, Rachel, if you want to talk a little bit about graduate programs and how that kind of helped you leverage your next step. So, Cheyanne, would you like to start?
Yeah, of course. So I'll share a little bit more about kind of the path that led me to residency and now citizenship around the corner, and then talk a little bit about my job experience as well. So, as I mentioned, with my husband and I, it was kind of okay, we both worked in tech, both had offices in London, who could get that visa? And luckily, his company did have a small office, and he was able to get that chance to move his job. I got to stay with my same company and move, but for me, it was kind of a London's a whole separate entity. If you want a job there, you have to kind of re-interview and get to know the London team. Whereas my husband got to kind of keep his current job, keep his work, and just move it to London, which was a great experience for him. But for me, not so much. And so I had to do like 8 rounds of interviews with the London team, kind of reestablish myself and prove that I could be in that new market and that new work. I was focused in recruitment and hiring people externally into the company that I worked for. And London and European recruitment markets are very different than the American markets. And so they really wanted to test my ability to understand that and adapt to it and show that I'm not just, hey, having an abroad experience, but also can do the work that they'd be kind of sponsoring my job for. And so luckily it worked out well enough where the interviews went smoothly, but it was actually a good experience for me to really go through that, as intimidating as maybe 8 interviews sounds. And I, being in recruitment, that's not normal. That's not recommended. It was a bit of a unique situation. But basically, it helped me also get into the mindset of, okay, yeah, this is a job change. How do I adapt into a new city, a new market, do what I do and do what I love, but make sure I'm really listening and learning to the culture and the nuances around me, and being able to balance that American in me in a new city. And so it was a kind of, that was my first step in. And then luckily, after I got established into the London office, I was able to move into what they called internal careers, which was then helping other employees move jobs within the company, whether it was local in our European offices or it was international where they were moving offices. And I was kind of helping with that visa process. And so, before I touch on that more, with my husband and I, it was kind of this game of he got the visa first, but it was a 5 year fixed visa where we would have had to leave the country after 5 years and then wait a year to come back again. That was kind of the terminology at the time. And we were like, oh, we might want to be here longer than 5 years. So, like, how do we do this? Okay. And luckily, with the work that I was doing and established myself well enough into our London office with my work, I was then able to actually ask my leadership to give budget to sponsor me as the visa holder rather than my husband. So we kind of flipped to like, then I was the visa holder and he was the dependent, and I could help him kind of move jobs and have some flexibility. And that put us on the path of more permanent residency versus that fixed 5 year plan. So it was nice to kind of secure that and kind of, I did have to put probably 2 years of work into that new office and my new leadership team and kind of help justify the budget because it is expensive for visas to be sponsored by companies. So I'm glad it worked out well enough. But luckily, after 5 years, you can apply for that permanent residency. We got that a couple years ago, and now getting citizenship is super exciting. I have the application packet on the table I'm looking at, and we just got to mail it. But it's exciting to feel like this can be that forever home. But yeah, with work, it's been so cool to not only help people find new career opportunities in what they do and what they love at a company that they love, but also have them get those abroad experiences if they so choose. And with that, it was a really interesting experience of being able to lean on my own kind of path through international moves and kind of the visa logistics and job changes and interviewing for those and how do you do all that. But I think kind of being behind the scenes of it really helped me understand the mechanics of how these things actually happen. Because I think sometimes you hear stories of people going, oh, they just got to move to London or they just got their job changed to Dublin. How do they do that? How does that actually happen? And so it was cool to be on the back end of that. So basically, how my company was running things with that process was employees could be in other hubs and they could see all the jobs globally on the job board and apply to any job. But what happens then is, although it's within the company, there is still sponsoring that visa, paying the budget for that, the timeline of that, logistics of that. Some countries, like the UK, sometimes make a company prove that they couldn't find a talent in the UK, and they actually need to justify why this person has the specialized experience to come over and kind of sponsor that visa for. So I was behind the scenes in those logistics of, okay, if someone's coming from California and they want to move to London, if they're by themselves or if they're bringing a whole family with them, what are those costs? What is the timeline? How does that look? What benefits do we offer? So I actually partnered really closely with our relocation teams, finance teams, and leadership teams to kind of put together these packages. And so in all of that, the candidate themselves or the employee themselves is interviewing for the job, meeting the team, getting to kind of showcase how their skills could translate to that new work. And a lot of times they did very well. And it was, of course, when you're within the same company, there's a lot of great similarities in how you can share your skills and your work. But what it came down to is, yeah, is this person different from anyone local that might want to take this job? And do we have that additional budget? And a lot of times that took, extra conversations for the business to justify that expense. So as much as people loved the idea and the fantasy of moving abroad, I kind of saw with the business how sometimes they have their heart in the right place. And they want to sponsor somebody to have that opportunity. But unless it's a specific role or a specific kind of timing, it doesn't always work out. Or sometimes an employee thinks, oh, well, I'll just go for a year and then, see what happens. And in the jobs that I was supporting in the business, these were customer facing positions. They're ones that are pretty established in the market. They need to have someone who's there a bit longer. And so sometimes a hiring manager might get spooked of, oh, if you're just kind of using this to come abroad for 6 to 12 months, I actually need someone in this job for 2, 3, 4 years to establish themselves successfully in this customer base or in this kind of product that we've got. So there's always those nuances you have to be mindful of. I won't get too much more in the weeds because that's already a bit specific. But it just gives you a flavor to sometimes how businesses think about moving people to new locations or new opportunities. It happened a lot, I would say, even though I was recruiting a lot of people kind of locally in London or in other European offices. There's still only 20% of jobs that were relocations, whether it was the US to London or European locations, whether it was people within Europe where they started in London, they want to move back home to Italy, or they're in Dublin and they want to come to London, you know? So in tech, especially, there is still a huge appetite and huge support for people having those broad experiences. It's just a matter of being able to advocate for yourself, really get to know who is in that new hub. How do you get to build those relationships? I feel like Europeans are very relationship based. And so it's very much kind of letting them get to know you, who you are, not just the work that you do, but who you are as a person. They love to connect and kind of bond. And one of the pitfalls I made when I first moved to London is I'd be in meetings and kind of have that American, like, hey, how are you? Great, let's go. Let's talk about the work. And I would kind of get laughed at, like, Cheyanne, just how was your weekend? How are you? And I'm like, oh yeah, sure. So they're so genuine and so connected here that I love that it's like when I was kind of going through giving advice to people that were looking for those broad experiences, it was always just, get be yourself, get to let them get to know you, get to know them, really let them see that you're serious about this and excited about it. And they will try to do what they can to make it happen. So that's kind of my exposure into it in the tech world. I know every industry runs a bit differently, but I loved doing that work. And it was a really great experience of probably a good 6 or 7 years of that internal careers work that I did.
Thank you so much, Cheyanne. Yeah, that was a really great overview of your experience with your company and how you got across. And Rachel, in a totally different vein from a higher education perspective, would you like to share your history here?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, Cheyanne, I just want to say that's really interesting. I think also coming from multinational tech, big tech, to hear about the difference in even, knowing that I guess there's still a challenge with getting visas for some people. That's very interesting. So yeah, for me, mine is very different. So if we back up before I got on my work visa, I was on a student visa, of course. So that was for a year to do my program. They actually, I think, give you a little over a year. So I think my program was 12 months and I was given, let's say, 14, 15 months or so on the visa. So they give you a little bit of time to find something, but not very much. So lucky for me, though, I think I'm a strange case, but I applied for one job. And that was the one that I ended up getting and the one that, yeah, that I was with. And what happened the year that I graduated, and partially, part of the reason why I wanted to do my master's that year specifically was the UK rolled out the graduate visa. And that allowed anyone that had been on a student visa and had successfully completed a degree in the UK, a 2 year post-grad visa, basically, to allow that person to work and get a chance to, try working in the UK. Also, a chance for the UK to retain that talent that they just brought in and, help students invest in their time there and wanting to give them a chance to get back to the UK job market as well. So I was very happy to be able to apply for that one. And all I needed was to have completed my degree. So it wasn't reliant on a company. But by the time I got my job, I went to them and said, "Look, I have a sponsorship for 2 years. I'd like to put in the time," and I made it very clear from the start. I'd like to put in the time and for these 2 years and see if full sponsorship for a work visa perspective is something is possible when those 2 years are up. So I was very communicative from that at the start, which I recommend, especially for anyone who is on a visa that has a fixed end date. So for me, I had to be proactive, and that's something that I was looking at from the start. Another thing that I looked at when I got this job was I checked, there is a list, this is getting very technical, but there's a list online of all of the different companies in the UK that hold a sponsor license. So if you're thinking of working specifically in the UK, I recommend checking that list to make sure that whatever company you're going for, or if you have an offer for them, that they do indeed hold a sponsor license. It's not to say that companies can't, but it's a lot easier if they already have one in place. So lucky for me, mine did. So I worked there for 2 years on my grad visa, and then afterwards was able to switch over to the what's called a skilled worker visa, and that's the visa that I'm on right now. So I'm still putting in my years towards my permanent residency, what Cheyenne has, and eventually my citizenship. But putting the time in, and time goes pretty quick when you're having a good time. But yeah, so that's what I'm doing. So quite different, I think, to some of the different paths. And I think with some of my groups of friends, or when you meet people here and they're not British, I think the conversation comes up pretty quick of what visa are you on, and you'll be surprised the different routes that are available to people, and they're constantly changing. So that's the one thing you have to keep an eye out for. But I think that's been my path. And like I say, I think the biggest thing for me was that proactivity is I wasn't on one that, was going to be, I didn't know how long I was going to be here either. So there's also that part as well. But I was trying to plan for the foreseeable future of wanting to stay in the UK. I think that's the best thing to do, even if you don't know if you're going to go for it. I think you better to put yourself in that scenario and be set up for success if that's something that you decide that you want to do later, then decide later and have no pathway to do that. So I think for me that is something that I always wanted to prioritize when thinking about visas, when thinking about jobs and my next steps.
Thank you so much, Rachel. And I shared that link in the chat here of different companies that are licensed to sponsor visas. And something that has opened up its restrictions in the last couple of years is the high potential individual visa. So this is a different route than either of our speakers took. However, certain UC institutions, so this includes Berkeley, Irvine, Los Angeles, San Diego, and Santa Barbara. Graduates from these institutions may qualify for this high potential individual visa. So I've put the link for that in the chat as well. That qualifies you for 2 years of permission to stay in the UK. But I'm sure there are individual restrictions. So I've linked the website and I recommend doing a deep dive if that's something that you're interested in. So thank you so much for that history on that topic. Chloe, I hope that answers your question that you submitted in the chat. I think it addresses all of it, but if you have any additional question, please let me know. I'll move on to the next question I have here, which is, what is it like moving back to the UK as a working professional as opposed to a study abroad student? So, how did you form community outside of your UCEAP bubble? Who makes up your social circle now, and what recommendations do you have about getting connected to your local area? And how is it being away from family long term? So, I know that's a long question, but if you can encompass all of those aspects in your response. And Rachel, do you want to start this time?
Yeah, sure. I will try to answer everything, but if I don't, just interrupt me and I can go back. But yeah, I think it's really different in my experience, studying abroad versus moving abroad and living here and working here now. When I studied abroad, I very much was part of my EAP bubble. I had my friends from California. I felt sometimes it was a little hard to branch out and meet some more people. I think part of it is not knowing how long you're going to be there. For me, I was only there for a semester each time. So it's hard. Also, Cheyanne had mentioned the travel portion, and I'm sure anyone who's studied abroad with UCEAP, I think we had class Monday to Thursday, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we were off doing something, either, getting a train or a flight. So you're a bit you're a bit all over the place in terms of the travel and what you want to do. So I clung very close to my EAP friends. Whereas when I moved abroad after, and I moved abroad solo, it was a lot harder, I think, in the beginning to meet people. And you don't have that bubble that you can hold on to and rely on. So for me, I became friends with people in my cohort from my master's. I lived in a shared house when I first moved, so I had three other girls, and I got to meet some of their friends, meet their parents, meet other people in their lives, um, meet people in our area, and kind of it grows like that when you're there. I also, once I started working, I'm in a really good work team that we like to go for drinks usually every Thursday. So that was something that was very different to when I worked in the Bay Area and everyone drove places. I think that's something that was, really different. Moving to London and having a bit more of that work social life. I never really had that when I was working in the Bay Area. It just was very, yeah, it was just very different, kind of a welcome change. And you don't have to drink, but it's just, something to build into your schedule every week, let's say. And then I think the best thing that I did to really branch out and meet people here was I joined a touch rugby team. And that was really fun. That's a mixed group in my local park near my house, that I've been on for the last, I think, what, 3 or 4 years. And that's been really, really special. It's something that I never thought I would do. I never thought I would do it when I studied abroad. It never even crossed my mind. I think the first year that I was living here, and someone had mentioned touch rugby, and I just thought it might be a good way to meet people, and have, a different support group out here. And I think it was one of the best decisions that I've made. I have now watched some of these guys get married. I've met their families. It's so special now to have this group of people, that I've met, and I see them once a week. And we play a social game of rugby, and then usually go for a drink. So that's really nice. And I really enjoy having that. So my, I guess, advice in the making friends and kind of branching out, um, after studying abroad, if you're thinking of working and moving to somewhere new, is just be open, try different things, try meeting people, go to different meetup events or groups. Hi Shan, you're back. um, I think that for me is, and just kind of having that open mind, that's something that I developed when I studied abroad initially, and something that I kind of tried to bring over when I came back here. So I think that's something that I've kept with me the whole time. But that would be my advice on the friend side. The other question you had said was about being far away from friends and family. So yeah, that one is tough. So all of my family are still in California. I think for me, I always look at it on the bright side. There are 5 flights a day to San Francisco nonstop. I try to go home once or twice a year. They try to come out here, I'd say at least once a year. So, or we meet somewhere in the middle and we make a holiday out of it. So there are ways to do it. I would probably say too, I probably speak on the phone more to my family now than I did when I lived at home. I think you make time for the people that you care about, and the time zone, you figure out what works for you. Um, so I would say that that is something that I think is not too bad. But I'm very lucky that I've been able to have those chances to go home as well, which I recognize, and have them meet me over here too. So that's very special. But yeah, the reality is, yeah, it is far. But you get a couple movies downloaded and get on the flight, and then you're kind of home before you know it. So yeah, those are kind of my pieces on those two things. Was there a third question, Bran? I can't remember.
You hit the third one, so you're all set. Thanks, Rachel.
Okay.
That's great. All right. And that answers Amy's question in the chat, which is how often do you visit the US? So thank you so much. So Cheyenne, I'll let you take over.
Sure. Yeah, I'm sorry, my camera turned off for a minute. My dog got very excited and started barking. So I had to, like, make sure she was all right, but all good. Yes. So, gosh, it's been a while now. But when I first moved over, I think this was like pre-COVID, right? So 2018, yeah, early 2018. And so it was just really normal to go into an office 3 to 4 times a week. And so that really helped me establish my routine of life in London, getting used to the tube, getting, around the city and getting confident and comfortable with that. And then when it came to meeting friends, kind of as Rachel mentioned, it is pretty great to have. It's San Francisco was a lot of commuters coming in and out. So like Rachel, maybe not always the like post-work experiences. Whereas London, I do feel like, especially when the sun's out in the summertime, the pubs are full of people post-work and wanting to socialize, wanting to connect. And as I said before, it does really feel like in like London and European culture that people really love to get to know the people they work with. And not that that's not happening in the US, but I feel it even more so here in London. And it's nice where there's just different, birthday celebrations, office lunches. People take their lunches actually like out of the office, which is nice to kind of go grab food together. And my first friend groups really started from that office culture, which was great. And the London office for the company I worked for was mostly non-Londoners or non-British. It was a lot of expats from other European countries, Americans. So a lot of my friends actually from that space are from Sweden to Italy to India to, Germany. Like there's just all over the world representation, which is great. Not that I'm not friends with British folks, but it was cool to get just kind of fellow expat tribes happening, for lack of better phrasing. But yeah, I think work is where the friendship started, and then my husband, moving over here together, as we are still here together. It was nice to have that fixed person that I can have this move over with, have that experience with. So he's my go-to travel partner. He's my go-to, like, let's go out and to dinner, explore different parts of the city. So I was very lucky in that sense. But I do have a lot of those expat friends that I mentioned who moved over there, over here on their own, and they just really put themselves out there and got to know folks through work, through shared, sports activities, through, social act. Like there's a lot of social culture. Like pubs are not, they're such a different place of very family oriented and very socially oriented. You definitely don't have to go just to drink. It's very much like quiz nights and, like, live music and Sunday roasts where you're just there with your friends and having a great meal and hanging out. And so it seems like that culture mixed in with London having just so much to do, and there really is something for everybody, that you can really find spaces where wherever you have pure passions or hobbies, there's going to be a place for it or a group for it. I feel like every time I turn a corner and see some cool setup, I'm like, oh, that's here too. That's amazing. So between that and I saw Bryn at the gala here in London. We had the UCEAP event a couple weeks ago. There's actually a really strong UC alumni presence in London. So they have a lot of events that they'll do, to Thursday nights at pubs, I believe, to month kind of monthly events. There's a lot that even after 8 years, I'm like, how did I not know about this? But there's a really great, strong identity and culture of UC alumni that are here. So that's a great way to get your foot in the door socially as well. Um, yeah, and then with family, it would takes time a little bit. Myself and my husband were both ones that we were the first ones in our family that ever had really traveled or lived abroad. That was just a very new concept to our families. And at first they're like, "What are you doing? How long are you going to be gone? You're going to be back in 6 months, right? Like, when are you coming back?" And it was kind of having to be like, "No, this might be a forever thing." And that took some folks more than others to adjust in our family systems, but ultimately everyone was just very supportive and excited. And, they come here, we go there. And I would say on average, we're traveling back once a year at this point. Sometimes it's two or three if there's a wedding or a big birthday or something that we want to go celebrate for. But yeah, 10 hours of a flight does seem intimidating at first, but when you do it so many times to go back and forth to see family or friends, or that's who you get to go home to and spend time with. Like Rachel said, there's nonstops constantly to LA and San Francisco. A lot of my family's in Southern California, so we just do that LAX nonstop flight, get there, rent a car, figure it out from there. And yeah, you get used to it really quickly, more than you think you'd realize. So yeah, now it feels like I've got a really great culture of just a few great close friends. And I go to like Pilates and spin classes, and my husband just signed up to like a baseball league. They, have like Americans and Brits that love to play baseball. So he's going there every Monday night and playing games. So yeah, it feels like a city where it's really easy to find those social connections and opportunities.
Thank you so much to both of you. So we'll do a quick pivot now, over to financial conversations. So thank you to Amy and Caitlin and Sam for all your questions about this. So Amy's first question was, what financial cushion do you recommend having before taking the plunge and moving? So we'll start there and then we'll move on to the other aspects. So uh, Cheyanne, do you want to start?
Sure. Gosh, yeah. So the number is going to be different for everybody. I don't know if I could say there's a fixed number that's like, this is how much you need to have to get started. I think it really depends on where you're moving to, how long do you think that you're going to be there, and what is your, oh, lifestyle goals, emergencies that you'd want to have contingencies for. I'm very much a planner and very much like spreadsheets and, all the organization. It probably was a year and a half process of researching, organizing, preparing myself for the move abroad, from visa research to job search to interviews to what are those numbers that I need to have for emergency funds or savings, or what's rent and how does that look like? I just was obsessed with Googling all the details. So that way, when I got here, it felt so much smoother. Like I had my bearings a little bit more. The internet's an amazing thing, and you can really find everything that you need. And so I really just, there's even cool stuff like, oh, cost of living in San Francisco versus London. And they have these great comparison websites where it can show you like the cost of milk in both countries, or like it really can get nitty gritty for you. So leverage Google, leverage, I mean, I didn't have ChatGPT and stuff back in the day, but like leverage those different engines to give you the information that you need because it's all accessible and it's all there. And find out what kind of happy medium you can get. I would say coming from San Francisco and being in the tech industry, London felt cheaper, but that is a very uniquely specific situation. London is a very expensive city, and for a lot of my friends from all over the world, it was a big adjustment coming to used to rent prices to the tube is actually pretty affordable and cheap, but it is an added cost. But then you don't need a car, so you're not paying gas and insurance and things. So there's a way that you balance it out. If I think back to what my numbers looked like, I can't say I remember exactly, but what made me feel comfortable was probably having 6 months worth of rent and bare kind of utilities, groceries type budget, plus enough money to fly back home if I had to. Like it was kind of that range of if everything goes horribly, I lose my job, what's my runway? And that felt good to me. But I was also 23 and barely had any money. So my version of that was probably quite different than what I would say now at 33. But yeah, if I can answer more details or maybe more questions around that too, if that's helpful. But thinking back on it, I think that's how I approached it.
That's great. We'll get Rachel's thoughts on that, and then I'll ask some more in-depth questions about finance.
Yeah, I'm happy to weigh in on this as well. I think I had a similar mindset to Cheyenne, I have to say. I was doing a program, so I had to have my tuition money set aside for the 1 year, which actually worked out to be less than what it would have been to do a master's degree in the US, which again was part of my thought process when I was going through all of this. So it was only a 1 year program, and it was basically half the amount of time and maybe not half the price, but certainly less. So I had to have that, and then I had about maybe, yeah, I think I tried to save at least 6 months worth of rent because I needed to pay that up front. So when I moved over to the UK as a student and didn't have a job to sort of guarantee my income for the rent, I had to put 6 months up front of my housing costs. So I would say just keep that in mind if you're coming over for a post grad course. But I think in general, in my head, I probably tried to have 6 to 12 months of living expenses, which really I think is what they say to budget for, at least have like a 3 to 6 month rainy day fund if, you lost your job tomorrow. To make sure you have that. I think that's really the rule of thumb wherever you are, and you can aim for that. And I have been thinking about this well, since I studied abroad, of course, but I think in terms of putting money away and trying to save, at least for the year and a half before I went. And even when I was doing my travels in Australia, that was something that I was thinking about and wanting to make sure that, if I didn't have to work, like if I could I go travel without having to work, or could I do this program for a year and not have a part-time job. I didn't work when I was doing my program, so I really need to make sure that I was had enough savings to live off of. So I think that for me is what I would recommend. But as Cheyenne said, there's a lot of resources online that you can kind of model out what you will need. The UK they give out a sort of cost of living. I think it's like a maintenance thing per month. They can kind of break it down for you. I would say take that with a grain of salt because that's for all of the UK. London is probably, if not the most expensive place to live within the UK. But I think so it's just something to keep in mind when you're doing that. I think, yeah, in a perfect world, the more you can save, the better. But as Jan mentioned, you definitely adjust to cost of living once you're here. So there's a question about, I see there's a question about salaries and does free healthcare make up for it? I would say largely yes. And Cheyenne mentioned the tube as well, which is a lot less expensive than having a car. So I didn't need a car, I don't need insurance. You don't need parking. Like there's a lot of things that I used to spend my money on when I was working in the Bay Area. I think I paid $30 a day for parking when I would go to my job. And that was before COVID when you went in every day. So that adds up. It's like $8,000 a year. So if I don't make that now, I'm not spending that on the tube every month either. So I think it's really, really different. My friend told me she lives in New York. She told me a matcha costs like over $10. and my head sort of exploded. I don't think I've ever spent that in London. I hope it never happens. Cheyanne's like shaking her head. I think, yeah, things don't cost as much here either as well. So that's that's the balance, right? But yeah, in terms of healthcare, I can walk into a doctor's and get seen, and they wouldn't even necessarily ask for my name or my address, and they don't give you a bill at the end of it. It's a really incredible experience to have that and be treated like an actual human being. When you have a question and you don't have to worry about, well, will I get this really hefty bill if I need to go in? And I think people respect that here, and they don't call the emergency line for every little thing, because I think people for the most part respect that there's no cost for that. So people are working hard to provide those services, and it's free for, taxpayers and the people that pay into the service as well. So those are my thoughts, without making it too political. Those are kind of my thoughts on it, but I'm a big fan of yeah, UK health system and kind of being over here, cost of living, all of that.
Thank you so much, Rachel. And you alluded to this, but I wanted to go a little more in depth based on Sam's question here is how do you navigate UK salaries compared to US? So this is some of the discussion we had prior to this meeting is that UK salaries are significantly lower in some ways. So it's good to set expectations for those considering the move. Cheyanne, do you want to start by talking about the salary negotiations, having been on that side of things?
Totally. Yeah. So, as I mentioned, a lot of my work was helping people move jobs within my company, whether it was in the same location they were currently in or relocating. And I did have a lot of Americans, especially ones coming from New York or San Francisco, that were like, "What? That's it? That I'm going to get paid in London? Like, why would I go?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's a different market. It is this sticker shock, I guess you could call it, of the numbers do look different. Um, it depends on industry, it depends on job, depends on level. So I can't say one salary is going to be the salary that you would expect. But I think there's a lot of data around like the national averages in the UK are around like £30,000 a year. And I think London is indexed up to like 37 or 39 these days, which probably does sound pretty low, right? Like we're not used to that in the US. But the whole market around London or around the UK is different than the US. There are a lot of government funded things like the NHS system, like subsidized travel or tube, and just things that make life feel easier. And I think whenever I was talking to folks who are really kind of going through that emotional wave of, wow, my salary is going to be very different leaving the US or from these big cities coming to London, where you'd think on paper they'd have relatively similar numbers. A lot of it for me is like, well, do you want to move abroad or not? Like it's the nature of the situation. And maybe as unsupportive as that might have felt at times for folks, I think it's a little bit of like, it's a different market here. In these big cities that we're looking at, like New York with finance, tech in San Francisco, those are kind of bubble specific, very specific cities and industries that they're surrounding themselves with. London in the UK has a vast array of different industries, jobs, profiles. A lot of people in London don't work in tech, don't work in finance, don't work in these high paying fields. And so a lot of the cost of living around, it's a big city. There's neighborhoods and pockets where things are still very manageable, affordable, budgetable for folks at any price point. And so, yes, there is the expensive neighborhoods, or there's a spectrum. But I would say for me, where I really made the decision to move, and where my husband and I also had to go through that journey of salary change, was we wanted to be abroad. We wanted to live in London. And yes, it's that first sticker shock you have to get over. But when you do really start looking at, and where that research for me was so helpful, is looking at the price of groceries, looking at the price of travel, looking at the price of like apartments and flats. Like being able to do that research ahead of time helped me build that bigger picture of, okay, the salary is lower than I thought it would be, but I can actually afford all this. I can do it. Like if I think about it this way, if I make these adjustments here, any country move, any relocation to any new city, any new country is always going to be an adjustment. And finance is part of it, but it's also like the flats are different here. The way that you buy your groceries is different here. The way you go to healthcare is different. Like every piece of life is different. And for me personally, a lot of it's been so much for the better, and I love it here. But I think sometimes folks get too hyper fixated on the salary. And yes, you want to be informed and be prepared and live a life that you feel comfortable with. But the nature of any situation is going to be, anytime you relocate, the market's going to be different there, and the cost of living is going to be different there. And it's okay to adjust. The folks that ended up going through with it that I helped, were like, oh my God, thank you so much. Like I was so afraid at first, but it actually worked out fine. And I'm so happy. And it does feel so much more doable here than San Francisco or, New York. So a lot of folks ended up ultimately being really happy with it. So I can't personally have said I've seen an experience where someone actually struggled with that cost of living difference, as much as it might seem from the outside.
Thank you so much, Cheyanne. And Rachel, you've raised your hand.
Thanks. I just want to add one more thing that we haven't touched on in this conversation, which is holiday time, vacation, how much time you get off in the UK. So I personally have 28 days of annual leave per year, and those are days that I'm encouraged to take. So I think compared to the US when I worked there, and I was given a generous, what was I was told was a generous 15 days a year. So it's very different. I struggle to take all of my days, to be honest. I have been told by managers before that I need to take these days off and I truly need to be offline. So there's no expectation of bringing my laptop with me. So I would also say, too, in terms of maybe the difference with receiving a lower salary, you get more time off. You're effectively only working 11 months out of the year. I work in higher education as well, so we have additional days given off in between Christmas and New Year. We have a lot of bank holidays in the UK, so it might not be 4th of July, but we have 2 Mondays off in May coming up when the weather is really nice. So again, I think it's that trade-off that Cheyanne was talking about, and I completely agree. I think when you go into it, the advice I have is don't look at it like a like for like comparison of I've been in this job, I should be making this much. It should commensurate with the amount of years I've been here or doing this. If that's something that if you come in with prior job experience, I think really try to have that open mind. You'd be surprised at how you can stretch the pound, I would say too, and I think that's what we're talking about. But I definitely want to touch on the fact of vacation time and also being encouraged to take that. I think that work-life balance, at least for me, what I have found with my experience, it's it's a lot better than I could have imagined and what I had previously.
Thank you so much. Okay, that was great background for that question there. And we're coming near the end of time, so I just want to pivot quickly to Sophie's question here, which is, Rachel, can you give more insight into the master's application process? How did you find a program that fit your interests, and how did you figure out if your bachelor in the US could meet UK standards? So I know that's a lengthy question. We've got 5 minutes left, but if you want to give a little insight.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm if I can share my LinkedIn after this, if anyone has questions or wants to get in touch and we can continue the conversation offline, because I'm a big advocate for higher education, obviously, and studying over here. But yeah, for me, I researched a lot of different programs and kind of decided between one or two that I was interested in. I knew London was the place I wanted to be. I also looked at the professors that I wanted to study with. So I read a lot of their bios. I remember looking at some of the research that they were working on because for me, again, that experience that I wanted to make sure that I would be learning from the best people. So I specifically I looked at a couple of people that I wanted to I hope to have the chance to work alongside, and it worked out for me because I ended up doing an internship with one of the professors I was really eager to work with. So that was really, really nice. But yeah, for me, I kind of did my desk research online. Tried to speak to as many people that I could from LinkedIn if they had done a similar program to me. I found that people were very open if I reached out and explained my situation to, have a 30-minute phone call with me or have a chat. So for me, that was my experience. But yeah, I can go into more detail, but I don't want to take up the rest of the time. But I'll drop my LinkedIn and just feel free to add me and we can message about any specific questions to applying for a master's in the UK.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Rachel and Cheyenne. I presume that you're also comfortable with sharing your LinkedIn. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. If anyone wants to reach out and ask more questions, I'm happy to answer.
Okay, great. Well, we have a lot of questions in our chat, but unfortunately we have 4 minutes. So I think I'll end with Amy's question, which is just what is your long-term vision for your future in the UK? Are you planning to stick around? Are you planning to head home? Um, Give us a little tidbit about your next steps, and then we'll go offline with the conversation.
Yeah, sure. So, as I mentioned, citizenship is right around the corner. I'm getting that application in, and I should know in the next, it's a 6 month kind of window where they approve you or not, but all trending in the right direction. For me, this really does feel like my forever home. I didn't know that it would be the case when I first moved here. It was very much a let's start in London and see if we want to move to another country, even, or keep traveling, or maybe we'll feel good and got it out of our system and move home. So it really, I didn't really know what my plan was. And I mean, I still have a lot of life ahead of me, so you never know. But for me, it really feels like home to me. I love this city. I love living in the UK. I love being so accessible to travel to places I love across Europe and otherwise. And so for me, this is it. And it's crazy because I never thought I'd be someone who stayed in one place. Like I really am shocked by saying that out loud, but it's really a cool spot to be. And like Rachel said, I have so many times where I'm just pinching myself like, oh my God, I live here. Like this is real. Like this is so cool. And so yeah, I think it's the long term citizenship for me means that full security of being able to call this home for as long as I want to and being able to have that dual citizenship. It's just yeah, going to be a huge win. It'll be really exciting to have that. Permanent residency is great, of course, too, because that's also permanent. But yeah, it's been a great experience to live here and call this home.
Thank you so much, Cheyanne.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think the UK is home for me. I don't know if I would have thought that when I first moved over. I think I always gave myself a year. I kind of signed on to the UK like a lease on a flat or, something. It was like, I'm going to do this for a year. If I like it, I'll stay again. And I've done that for what's going to be 6 years soon. So safe to say I'm probably here for the long term. My partner is here as well. So we maybe we'll go to California for a year, but probably the UK is home for us for the foreseeable. So it's really crazy to say that. I don't think it happens overnight. It's kind of this feeling that it kind of builds and builds, and all of a sudden you have so many pinch me moments. And you're like, wait, I live here. I do this. This is my life. And then all of a sudden you wake up, and then it's been 6 years or so. But that is kind of how it was for me. So I think we always allow ourselves to the right to change our minds, but my mind every day has woken up and been really happy to be in London.
Thank you so much. And I'm sure that many of the attendees today hope to have that experience one day of being able to wake up and see the reality of their life in London. So thank you all so much for attending today. Rachel, thank you for putting your LinkedIn in the chat. I will follow up via email with everyone who's registered for the talk. I know that I saw several people joined after we covered certain topics, so we will be sending out a recording of this, but we'll need to get it up online. So give us a few days for that. Cheyenne's also put her LinkedIn in the chat there. So if you'd like to follow up with either speaker, then you're more than welcome to. And thank you all so much for your time, but especially thank you to Rachel and Cheyanne for their time today and for sharing about their experiences. So if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to send them over LinkedIn. Thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you. Good luck, guys.
Thanks. Yeah. Thank you.